up a few other things. All right.
Hey, what's up? John Sonmez here from simpleprogrammer.com. And I have an interview for you today. This time, a reoccurring guest here at Simple Programmer, Marcus Blankenship. I've always appreciated what he's had to say. We've had some conversations here on the YouTube channel and podcast, and he's always got a lot of good, relevant experience, having had a lot of roles in the software development industry and becoming an entrepreneur.
Hey, I just want to give a quick thanks to one of our sponsors at Simple Programmer, which is Dev Mountain Bootcamp. You should go check them out. The link is in the description. They are a coding bootcamp, and they can teach you web development, iOS development, UX design, a lot of good stuff. I get a lot of feedback from a lot of you out there that email me and have told me about Dev Mountain, so I decided to check them out myself, and I like what I found. I like their programs. They offer some 12-week intensive programs. They also offer some after-hours programs, which I know that some of you will like. So go check them out. You can see the link in the description below, Dev Mountain Bootcamp, and a big thank you to them for sponsoring Simple Programmer.
So, but today what we're going to be talking about is 7 habits that ruin your technical team. Marcus has written an excellent book on this subject. I know that this was something that when I saw the book and read through the book, I was like, oh yeah, this is this is something that fits right up my alley with what I talk about here, and then also just something that I think would be valuable to all of you, because there's a lot of things that go wrong even when you have a really good technical team. So welcome, Marcus, and thanks for doing this.
Hey, thanks for having me on, John. Yeah, all of the things in the book are things I've lived through on one side of the table, of the desk, or the other. Usually both. I think almost everything I've been victimized by, and I've probably done to other people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very, very, I think it's good to shine a light on some of the things that you don't think about. Like at a common sense level, some of these things you say, oh yeah, but then until it's pointed out, you don't realize that you're doing that and how harmful it is.
Yeah, exactly. And, I want to just, like, as we start, I want to make sure that people understand that I don't believe that technical leaders do these things intentionally. Nobody's like using this as a stick to beat their team. This isn't about like shaming programmers intentionally or any of the micromanaging techniques. But I think these are habits that perfectly good leaders fall into without even really being aware of them.
Right. Yeah. I definitely agree. It also just makes sense, I think, to have the philosophy that people are not being malicious. I mean, most people are trying to do the best that they can.
Exactly.
So that with what they know. So.
And the time they have. So
exactly.
Time's always tough. Yeah. All right. Well, let's dive in here.
Okay.
So, let me just hit the first one here if I can. And I'm going to turn my head here. Let me move this in front of my screen so I can look at it a little easier here. The first one has to do with withholding feedback. So I don't know if that's ever happened to you before, but it absolutely drives me crazy when I don't know what my boss is thinking, or when I walk into an annual evaluation and I hear all this new stuff. Like, 4 months ago, I was in a meeting and you were kind of snotty to the customer and you really need to watch your attitude. Like, wow, what I'm not going to do is walk away from that and think, oh, okay, I really need to watch my attitude. What I am going to do is the employees, I'm going to think, what kind of jerk didn't just come and tell me right after the meeting? Like, so the first habit is withholding feedback, until the time is right, until we have some special ceremony at our company where feedback gets given.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree with this one. This is one of those ones. Actually, I'm going to point to a video. We'll put it in when we go live here. I did a video on actually, should you ask for feedback and this was kind of, and I basically said no, because it's kind of annoying as an employee to ask for feedback all the time. Kind of, I said like a puppy dog, like, did I do a good job? And always looking for that validation. But part of that is that the manager or the boss should give the feedback so that you don't have to ask for it, because it sort of puts you in an awkward position. So, and I think it's definitely a problem. I mean, if you get feedback too late, you can't respond to it, and then, like you said, so I think it's very critical to give the feedback right away to the people. And then what do they say, like to praise in public and to admonish in private,
in
right?
private. Yeah. You know, the book, it's an old book. Ken Blanchard's 1 Minute Manager is a classic, and it talks about just using these 60-second times to give praise, give feedback, give correction. I'm a big fan of doing it right in the moment. It doesn't have to be a big affair, right? And if you choose to pull somebody into your office, shut the door, sit them down, you sit down, you look across the desk and you say, that was a good job in there. Like, that's kind of ridiculous. That's a lot of fanfare just for a little piece of feedback. So, you know, I think it's better if you can get comfortable giving little bits of praise or even little bits of correction just in public. Now, I'm not talking about shaming anybody. We do have to be careful of humiliation, right? Because it's embarrassing. But if somebody, especially in a meeting, has maybe spouted off their mouth or said something kind of offensive, why not just take a second and say, I don't think that's the way we should be thinking about this, Bill. And I just want to kind of correct everybody's attitude to know that's not really the way we do things here, in case anybody's seeing this and is concerned. So, you know, and now let's just move on. It's just a quick moment. If you don't sort of correct things in public, is my view that you see in public, other people probably are thinking, especially new people, oh, that's how we do things here.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Now I get it. So we're kind of homophobic racists. Well, now I know. Like, and the boss just sat right through it and laughed just because, you know, he must be one too. But the reality is the boss might be thinking on the next evaluation, Bill's going to get a big red mark. Well, that's the wrong way to deal with it.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's also how you deliver it too, right? Because it's like you have to learn how to create the shit sandwich, right? As they call it. Where you got the praise, and then you deliver the bad part, and then you know a little bit of praise to follow. I mean, not to like make stuff up, but like there's always a way to say, you know, that's a really good point that you're making here.
That's the one layer of bread.
The way that you said it maybe is not the best. Is not communicating what I think that you actually might intend, because I know that you're a good person at heart, and it may have come off a little bit differently than you expected. You know, something like that. I think maybe is because then you're disarmed. They're not like, because I think if you just come out and almost all the time, you know, what's that Teddy Roosevelt quote? He says, "If you double my fists, I can assure you I'll double mine right back at you."
Yeah, you know, Netflix has a really amazing culture around feedback. The Netflix way of giving feedback is that anyone in the organization can and should and is expected to give feedback to everyone else in the organization sort of in the moment. And so you will find people that work on totally different teams and different reporting chains. And I've coached employees there at Netflix, and they were a little surprised the first time someone said to them, John, can I take a minute and give you some feedback about what I'm seeing? And they ask permission. And of course, John's going to be like, well, yeah, tell me. And so they model this behavior right from the beginning of people giving feedback. And, you know, you might imagine that people who are at the bottom would be really hesitant to give people at the top feedback, right?
Right.
But at Netflix, that's not so. People at the top get all kinds of positive and frankly, really negative feedback all day long. And so they actually train upper management to make sure they're not doing what they call punching down. Because when somebody up here gives feedback that's negative, it's like a force multiplier downwards. The farther down the chain of command you are, the more afraid you are that you're going to be gone the next day, right? They really teach the upper management to, accept all that feedback, but be really careful in how they respond, especially to somebody 2, 3, or 4 levels below them.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, just, you know, feel free to disagree with me, but that to me, that sounds like a great concept. And I like the idea of especially, I mean, training the management on it. But if I'm an employee, I just generally hold the idea that you shouldn't give negative feedback up, because I mean, some people can take it and it's fine, but a lot of times it doesn't work out well for you. So it
can be a career limiting move.
Yeah.
Right. A CLM can occur, and now you're either stuck or maybe you're out. I totally agree. And that's why I actually think Netflix's culture is so special, is because from day one, a new employee thinks that exact thing. Oh yeah, they're all about feedback. Right. You know what? Until they observe people at their level giving feedback above, them
Yeah.
and maybe way above them in public, and those people are still there and they're thought highly of. And so I think it does take a few months of really like living in that culture so that you understand what's appropriate, what's safe. And of course there's boundaries, right? You don't stand up in the middle of a meeting and call somebody an idiot, probably. That's not the kind of feedback we're talking about.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
But I wrote this chapter in the book because I see so many managers who either wait for the annual meeting or maybe the sprint retrospective, and they see stuff along the way, and they just kind of, I kind of say that, like, they've got this little set of notes and they're like, well, John did not do this. I'm making notes and we'll address this at a later time. So they keep like a record of wrongs. And then when the time is right, they bring it all out and then they blast the person. So I think that's the wrong way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. Yeah. That's, it, you know, and like you said, when you do it that way, they don't have a chance to make changes or to, you know, no one likes to be admonished for something they did like a couple months ago.
Absolutely. You know, and you hit the nail on the head, and this will be the last thing I say on this. The whole purpose of feedback, it better not be to punish or shame. It better be to produce change. So all of your feedback should be around the idea of, I want to produce a change in behavior, in skill, or in habit in the person I'm talking to.
Right. Exactly.
So that's your goal.
All right. Let's move on to the next one.
Here we go. Now, the next one has a weird title. It's Forgetting How Difficult Good Programming Is. Now, John, you code every day, right?
Not anymore. Not anymore. No.
What? So now you're a very successful businessman, but you have website properties. You need web work done, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so you probably hire people, is my guess.
Right. Exactly.
Do you ever, and so this bad habit comes from when you've been removed from programming for as long as I have, and maybe you start to have a fond memory about how good you were at it. And you start to maybe misrepresent in your own mind how hard something should be. And you start to use phrases like just or simply, like just put a form on there. Can't they just log in with Facebook? When you forget how hard good programming is, you know, it really makes your team think you're kind of a clueless, pointy-haired boss, right?
Right.
I don't know if you've ever had a programmer try and explain to you why something that you asked for was really harder than you thought, but I have, and it's kind of it reminds me that I need to keep a humble attitude, because otherwise I just walk around like an arrogant jackass, and I assume my team isn't doing as good a job as I would have done when I were in their shoes.
Right. Yeah, I think that's definitely, you know, I've definitely been out of it long enough to have experience that, and experience that even at just a different level, just in any job. I've kind of realized too, that it's like any job that you do, like when you hire someone to do it, they're not going to do it the same way as you, and they might not be as good as you, but you can't only hire people, or you can't just hold the level up to where how you would do things, or the level that you would do them at, and expect everyone to meet that level, because they're not going to be, you know, they're perhaps, or they're going to do things a different way. And so I've sort of had to let go and say, okay, well, this isn't like exactly how I wanted and how I would do it or as fast, but is it better than me having to do everything myself? And I think that's what I think of now as a business owner, is it's like, yeah, not everyone's going to do everything the best way, but that's okay. Like, I can give them feedback, like you said, and hopefully improve it. But otherwise, you know, and then also like you said too, it's just, I forget how difficult it was to do the thing.
I found right after I stopped coding, say maybe 6 months afterwards, my brain thought I was still a pretty good coder, and I would ask people to do stuff and they would say, well, that's going to be hard. And my constant feeling was, man, it's so hard to find, like, if I want anything done right, I have to do it myself. I don't know if you've ever heard that or felt that, but I think that's like a symptom of you're forgetting how difficult doing the work is, and the minutia. I mean, I can't tell you how many hours I spent in college looking for semicolons in C++ code, but I've totally like forgotten how hard that can be now. Of course, we have compilers and IDEs that tell us everything, but
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I just think it's a bad habit to get in that mindset where we sort of assume the rest of our team is not as good as we were.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and I find, like you said with the quote of, if I want something done right, I have to do it myself. It's really more of, if I want something done 100% to my perfection, I have to do it myself, and it's true, you do.
You do.
But you can choose between having everything done to 100% to your perfection, or having a lot more stuff done. And it's
I think that's a great point. That's a balance, right?
yeah.
And one of the things I found is just that idea of like, if I take the time to write out what I want, then I get better results, right?
Exactly.
And a lot of times I assume if I just say, well, let's use a Twitter login, or let's use, X or Y or Z kind of form. How about password recovery? That's easy, right? Everybody's doing it. But if I don't take the time to write out exactly what I'm thinking, and when I do take the time to do that, it forces me to remember there's a lot of nuance in it. Otherwise, I'm really asking the developer to fill in the gaps with their judgment.
Right. And you should, you should trust their, if you are asking them to do, like, if you can't trust people, like with my team, it doesn't mean I don't give feedback. If there's something wrong, I ask them to fix it or whatnot. But when I give them something, they go with it, and I trust them. I don't have to watch them like a hawk, and if I do, they're gone. I just fire, because I'm not going to keep someone on my team who I can't trust. If I can't trust you, if I think that you're padding hours, or you're not the work, or it's taking way longer than it should, then I don't trust you. And so I'm not going to try and fix that behavior. It's one of the behaviors I say that your mom should have taught you. I don't ever try to teach any of those or fix those, because it's like, your mom should have taught you how to work hard and be, and not lie, and be honest. Like, I'm not,
and be nice, right? I love that. Your mom, your kindergarten teacher and your mother should have given you the basic tools for human interaction. Exactly. And I'm sorry if you didn't get hugged enough, but you can't be on my team, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, come back, go to kindergarten, whatever.
Exactly. I think Robert Ludlum had a book in the 90s on everything I ever needed to know I learned in kindergarten,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Well, the next habit, and I'm just going to ask you, I bet you've never done this, but maybe early on, did you ever go in and fix your team's mistakes?
Ooh, you know what? That was one of my, so as an entrepreneur, that was one of my big mistakes, was doing that all the time. And I think I've done that as a developer too, in a management position. Yeah, of course, when I was teaching unit tests and things like that. And man, I learned real quick to instead tell people what was wrong and have them fix their own mistakes.
Wow. Like, you created a feedback loop that improved the team, even though, like, fixing someone else's mistake, I'll be honest, there's something that feels really good about it, right? You're like, oh, I'm going to show them how this needs to be done, and this is going to be beautiful. And then I'll never have to talk to them about it. And they'll just probably figure out how to do it next time. That never works.
Same thing. You just keep on fixing it every single time. Finally, I got smart, and now it's still temptation, right? It's still, when someone screws up, I'm like, oh, I could just fix this description or fix this thing real quick, even if it's a quick thing, especially. But then I have to say, no, I need to tell them to fix it so that they know, so that next time they don't make the mistake, or they see it.
Yeah.
Even when I explain afterwards, because even I found, like, if I fix something and then I say, here's what I did, you did this, and I fixed this up, so next time do that. They have to do it themselves in order to go through the pain in the process and realize, why to do it one way. So.
Yeah. Have you ever had anyone fix your mistakes in your career?
I'm trying to think if I've had a micromanaging boss. That's usually who does it, right? Who ends up fixing my stuff after it's
how did you feel?
Like, untrusted and inadequate, right? Like,
bad.
And also sometimes, not having the ability to, like, say, wait a minute, this is not actually a mistake. This is how I intended to do it, and there's a reason why I did it. I think that losing that kind of gives you the loss of power over your loss of self autonomy, which I think. Yeah.
That's a great point. Sometimes I would hand work over to a developer and outline a design. They would do it a different way with a different design, which also accomplished the goal. But when I looked at it, it didn't have the attributes, maybe the tables or the classes that I was expecting to see. So it was very easy early in my career to categorize that as a mistake. Like, they've gone off and done it a different way, rather than holistically being curious and saying, I wonder, I'll trust that they didn't turn in work that was wrong or that they never tested. So I wonder how they solved the problem. And then sitting down and having that feedback discussion, maybe you're actually going to learn something as a manager. Especially a couple of years after I'd stopped coding, I found my team was getting really good at things and using techniques that I hadn't used. So I had to start saying, oh, I guess I have never done aspect-oriented programming in Java. I didn't really realize that was a thing. And now I'm learning something new about it, which, by the way, was an old thing and now it's dead. So don't go look it up. But there's lots of fads in programming. You can't keep up with it all.
No.
I think having work taken away from you is one of the most demoralizing things as a programmer or any kind of employee. It just sends that signal that I don't trust you. I might as well do it myself. And frankly, you should be a little worried that I'm going to fire you, because if I can just step in and fix it so easily, why do I need you at all?
Exactly. And I'd say, on the employee side of that, it probably makes sense to always ask, when you do work, to say, hey, if you ever have any problem with anything that I do, if this is not up to the level that you want, just let me know and I will take care of it and fix it. Right. And that, I think that's a real, as a consultant, as whatever it is, so that you don't, this way you're, because I think some of the things too, like as an employee, maybe, or, we're talking like from a manager's perspective, but how what can you do if your manager is this? And I think,
what I did is, let's pretend your manager just reviews your PR and then he goes in and he fixes stuff and he checks it in and you notice it's been changed, right?
Right.
You can, you're not going to probably be able to help feeling bad about it, but that doesn't mean you have to get pissed. You can actually turn that event into a conversation where you give them some feedback, and it doesn't have to be confrontational. For example, I've walked into my manager and said, hey, I saw you made some changes to the code when you reviewed it. Could we sit down and review those changes so I can learn what you did?
Exactly. Right.
And I just basically asked that simple sentence. I never, ever had a manager say, no, like you're clearly too dumb to learn and you're just like a code monkey. No, they were like, oh yeah, let me show you my rationale here. And it deepened the discussion. And sometimes I learned, sometimes they learned, right? They would say, I was confused about this. Well, now I'll explain it. They also learned that I wanted that feedback, which you'd be surprised at how many managers, if we go back to that first habit,
right,
they're nervous about talking about feedback because it feels like conflict.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, you can't avoid conflict. But.
No, and when you as the employee make it clearly safe, you walk in and you say, I'd like to understand what you did with my code, not because I think you're a jerk. You have every right to do it. But all of a sudden they're like, oh, this person won't get mad and quit, because that's their big fear is you'll leave and they actually need you.
And, that's actually a great technique also that I used to deal with micromanaging bosses as well, is if someone's micromanaging you, you can always go, and every time that they do something, or like if they're, changing your code after you've checked it in, then you just go and you ask them every time, oh, did I do something wrong? Like, how did you want this done? And so, or if they're micromanaging you, every time they give you a task, you ask them a question on every single step of the item. Is this okay? I want to make sure that you get to see every single step. Like, is this right? Is this what you wanted here? And to the point that you annoy the hell out of them, that they say, just do it however you want to do it. Get out of here. Like, stop asking me all these questions. I just want to make sure that I'm doing it right, that I'm giving you all the feedback, all the information you need on this.
That's right. If they want it, give it to them, right? Like, you're the boss. I'm just here to support you. I'll do it however you want. Yeah. So why don't I come in your office every 15 minutes, knock on the door, and bring the work into you and say, is this what you meant? Yeah, I think that's a great technique. It really drives them crazy.
There was a good story in Donald Trump's book, The Art of the Deal, and he was talking about how it actually was done to him. But this hotel that he was part manager, or he part owner of, his wife kept on going in there, and she would like tell that they need to do this and do that, right? And she was just they were just like 50% owners, and so they got this. They hired this new guy to run the place, this French guy that got along with his wife really well, and every time they made any decision, they called up Donald Trump or called up his wife and said, we just want to make sure that these pillows that we're going to order, that you, and they ran every single decision by him. Finally, he was like, oh, I see what you're doing. Yeah, you just run your hotel how you want to run how you're supposed to run it. Like, I'll trust you.
Nice. Yeah. And it does kind of expose that behavior. The alternative, right, is, and most of us do it, is we become more protectionary. We start to like hide our work back here.
Right.
And we're like, well, I don't want to show him because he's always trying to look ahead and see what I'm trying to do. So I think that you just change the dynamic when you go here. Like, what do you want me to do? You don't trust me with any decision, so I'm not going to trust me with any decision. You have to make all the, what should this variable be called again? It represents an amount. What do you think, boss?
Exactly. It's judo. It's judo, right?
That's exactly using their force against them, right?
Yeah. Anytime you resist the force, you get more resistance. But you use it, you go with it. You say, all right, we're going micromanage around. Let's have fun.
Let's have fun with it. That's right. Well, the next habit here, I have this story I tell in the book. I'll just tell the story real quick. I used to work for this guy. I used to be a payphone repairman. Okay. So do you remember these things, payphones? Like, they're not popular anymore, but they were in the poor parts of town. And I had this boss who didn't even hardly know my name. He was a real jerk. And he always was convinced everybody was stealing from him, padding their timesheet hours, like super distrustful. And I worked for this guy for 3 years remotely. Like, I would service the payphones and collect the money and turn it all in. And it was an okay gig during college, but he was just not somebody he didn't like me and didn't care about me one bit. And one day he sends me that I didn't know they made Post-it notes this small, the smallest Post-it note I'd ever seen. And it had the word thanks on it. And it was stuck to my check. It came in the mail. And that was the only sign of gratitude I ever got from that person. And, at 46 years old, I would now wrinkle that up, throw it away and say, screw you, Charlie. But at 23 years old, I was like, wow, he noticed. Like, it meant something. All those late nights and snowstorms out in the middle of Bonanza, Oregon, with 80 people repairing this payphone. He cared. He appreciated me. I took that note. I put it in my wallet. And I'm a little embarrassed to say I kept it for 3 years, because it was the only sign of gratitude I got from that person. And that's when I realized that I had never heard it before, and I'd never hear it again from him, but it had this profound effect on me, that it motivated me. The next time I was in a snowstorm in the middle of, and this is really a town, Beaver Marsh, Oregon, population 56, as I was repairing their only phone, I remember thinking, like, at least he's thankful that I'm out here freezing my ass off, right? So I think a ruining habit is when we get managers who never express gratitude.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, if people don't know that you actually care, then what does it matter? Then what does it matter if they do a bad job or a good job too, right? Like,
exactly. And I'm curious, John, how do you show your team? You have this team, you're a businessman, you're the head of a multi-billion-dollar empire, going to be the next president of the United States. How do you tell people on your team? How do you communicate that you're thankful?
What I like to do, I like to vary it. Okay. And the reason why I vary it is because if you just, every time someone does something, you do the same thing, or it's always constant, then you make it an expectation, and that's no good. Right. So for example, I've worked at places where every time we complete a project or did something good, the boss gave us a bonus, and it seemed like a good thing, but it didn't, it also lost its meaning. Right, because you're not actually being specifically thanked for a thing. You just know that this is the thing, or whatever. So I try to vary it. So one thing that I'll do is, from time to time, when someone does a good job, I will send them some kind of a bonus. I'll just just suddenly send them a bonus
out of the blue.
I'll publicly thank them in somewhere, right? Like in a video or something, or an email, or to the rest of the team, so that there's like a public thank you of that. And I think part of it too is, one thing I try to do is I try not to give too much as well, right? So I think I know this is kind of getting a little bit off the topic, but just but I also feel like I said, that when your praise is too cheap, people know it's cheap.
It doesn't mean anything.
Right, exactly. So when I say you did a good job. Like, you really did a good job. And when I see it, I totally recognize it. And I say, this is awesome, really good job. And I'm lavish with the praise but not all the time. And I think that's like that. It's that balance, right? Some people never, well, just like you, like, I think, from your story where you put that thank you in your wallet for 3 years, part of it was because, I'm not saying that the guy did it right. I mean, maybe he was a little bit too holding back with his praise, but because his praise was not cheap, right? Like, it had an effect, right?
If he included a thank you note on every check, then by the first one, I might have stuck next to my desk. The second one maybe would have joined it. Every other one after that would have gone in the trash. I would have thought, all he does is write the check and write thank you on the note and stick it on there. That's just his habit, his routine. So I think you're absolutely right. Praise can become really cheap. I find that varying it, like I'll actually hand write sometimes a note of thanks and put it on somebody's desk. I will, like you said, call out in a group meeting, John, I really appreciate you got that done. You went above and beyond for me. And this time it really made I really appreciate it, because I know that, I know all of our families are important to us, but you were here until 10 p.m. And so thank you very much. Assuming that doesn't happen all the time, because sometimes we can actually praise people into almost behaviors that aren't as good as we hope for. Like, I actually don't want people staying until 10 p.m. every night, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I want it to happen once in a while. But in general, I think your team needs to know that you see the work, you acknowledge it, that they do. You actually have a position as a technical manager of knowing how hard the work is in a way that the client or the executives above you or the customers in another department probably never really realize. You know how hard it is. So I think being thankful and finding different ways to say it, my guess is most of us could go a long way before it started to become rote and trite. So I'd say if you're not doing it now, start doing it, and then kind of just watch yourself and watch how people react. At some point, they'll clearly not care that you're saying it. At that point, you probably need to vary it.
And one other thing I was thinking of that I do that I feel is really important is being very specific with the praise, right? So if I just say, man, you did a great job, you're just doing an awesome job, that is not nearly as good as saying, that I looked at this code that you wrote on that screen, whatever the login page, and that was really good. Like, I really liked how you did this. And the more specific it is, the more that someone actually feels that you actually care and appreciate it, the better that the praise is. But the more generic it is, it's like, oh, you're just awesome, thanks for doing such a great job. It doesn't really carry as much weight, I think.
I agree. And I think it sort of goes back to like when you give negative feedback, you also want to be specific, right? Don't just say, I've been disappointed in your attitude lately. That's pretty hard. Like, what part of my attitude? No, say, when you're in a client call, you appear to cut people off to rush to give your opinion before listening. That's a very specific thing people can improve on, right? Is becoming more self-aware. So yeah, you're right. And I actually get nervous when all I hear from a boss is how great I am.
Exactly.
Like, maybe I'm weird, but like, there's this part of me that's inside going, well, I know I'm not perfect, but he's not telling me anything bad. All I'm getting is praise every day for the first 2 weeks. I wonder when he's going to like let the other shoe drop and tell me, accept this thing that you've done every day that's driving me crazy, and now you're fired.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
That's my fear. So, well, the next habit's I see this one a lot. And a lot of the people in the group, people that are listening might say, well, they can't do anything about it. And that's the idea that it is really a bad habit to constantly be pushing your team to deliver faster. Yeah. To never give them a chance to sort of pause and refactor, to always be making commitments and schedules that keep them there 12 hours a day. I'm sure you don't do this to your team, John, but teams burn out, and people decide after a while, if the schedule isn't realistic, they're certainly not going to make a heartfelt commitment to it.
Right. Yeah. This is one of those things that I always encourage developers. I say, and this is important, I think, when negotiating a job, because I mean, there are certain circumstances where you're expected to work more hours, but up front, almost my entire career up front, I have basically said, look, I'm working 40 hours a week. That's what, like, because this is the contract that we're paying, right? The salary makes a huge difference whether it's 40 hours a week or 60 hours a week expected. And so I think just like knowing that up front, and you know, the team members pushing back and saying, look, and there's been places, I've worked in places where it was expected, everyone was working, you know, 12-hour days, and I'm leaving at 5, but I did hard work, did an awesome job while I was there, and I'm willing to accept like I'm here to be paid, because I don't want my hourly rate reduced. I don't just, and I think as a manager, I think that's really important, is to be able to say, like, look, we have to do a sustainable pace. You know, if you're constantly moving the finish line, that's like the most disheartening thing, I think, is when someone's constantly moving the finish line. Like, you're racing to get there, and then they're like, oh, it's actually a mile further.
Right. It seems more like running on a treadmill than running a marathon, right? Where you know where the ending is. It is difficult when everybody else around you is working 10, 11-hour days for you to, like, it takes a lot of internal fortitude, I think, to say, my 8 hours is up, I'm leaving. Right. There's a lot. I mean, like, I would actually be worried for my job if that were the case. And I think I have been like, oh, I'm leaving early, and the boss perceives me to be as the laziest person, or I'm not really all in. You know, bosses tend to want people somehow that are like willing to give up their soul for the work. And it's entirely unrealistic.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, you know, and I, you know, to diverge a little bit, it's about where you're investing your time, right? I mean, realistically, working for someone else and putting more than 40 hours. I mean, you do an honest day's work for an honest day's pay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not about cheating people and not doing your work, but what you put in extra than that, it seems like that it's going to benefit you so much. You're going to climb the career ladder and all this stuff, but it really doesn't as much as, and it's a very risky gamble, because you don't know. I mean, you could do that for 5 years and sacrifice nights and weekends and marriages and, you know, and kids soccer games and all this stuff.
Absolutely.
And then you just get laid off, and or no one notices. It doesn't matter. But, you know, but I guarantee you, I can guarantee you, at least if you have a good manager, like from my perspective, if someone is working hard and they're there 8 hours a day, hell, if they're there 7 hours a day, but when they're there, they're just like busting ass and they're doing the best job that they can, that person is not getting fired. You're not letting go of a resource that when they're working, you want to maybe get them to work more if you could, but you're not letting go of them. You're letting go of the people that are not getting the work done.
Well, and I think it's awfully sad, but I've worked at companies where, okay, so you tell me if this sounds familiar. Guy X, will call him Ron. Ron has done something that caused management to believe he would never be a good team lead and he's not promotable. But they're willing to let Ron work his ass off 12 hours a day, trying to show that he's the kind of company man who deserves a promotion, even though, frankly, everybody knows that Ron's got a big red circle around his name. Ron is not going to be one of the guys who gets to move up in the company because of something they've never even told Ron about a lot of times.
Exactly. Yeah.
So Ron is just and what happens pretty quickly, give it a few years, Ron sees people below him move up and past him, right? New people come in above him. And Ron just feels like, well, I you know, on one hand, is this ever going to work? The conventional wisdom says Ron needs to work harder. Of course, what you and I are agreeing on is that will never work. Ron can't work himself into that promotion. So unfortunately, it's too bad that they didn't give feedback and say, Ron, you know, you should probably just go, right? But they can't afford to. They need to keep that kind of worker around.
And Ron has he develops a victim mentality, and really what Ron needs is boundaries. He needs to say clearly, and it's like an abusive relationship. The sooner, like, you have to say, I don't tolerate, like, look, you know, I came in this one time on Saturday, helped you out, but this is what I do. This is general, like, it's not appropriate for you to like try and push me to work extra hour. You know, my marriage, my family, my whatever, my side projects, my free time, my hobbies, they're important to me. And this is from the very beginning to establish that as soon as someone crosses your boundary, rather than, I mean, 5 years in, exactly. You got all this anger and you're like, there's nothing I can do. And you feel like a victim, but it's because you didn't establish your bound, or even just saying like, look, this is what I'm expecting. Like, I expect to be promoted. Like, I'm working towards it. Tell me what I need to do. And then you're going to get the answer. Then if it's like, well, I don't know, like,
I'm not sure you're a company man, Ron. I feel like we're talking about the movie Office Space, right? Like, we're really saying those three guys were like, you know, they really allowed themselves to be victimized for years until the resentment and bitterness built up, right? They had to come in on Saturdays. They had that terrible boss who would come around and go, so how's it going? You know, and he'd bring his coffee cup.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It was just like, but I think you hit on an important point. They actually weren't victims. Every time that they let the company take advantage of them, they were making a choice. They were sort of internally thinking, I'll get ahead a little bit. This will be a mark in my favor. What they realized was that was never going to happen, but they didn't know it, and they didn't have an honest conversation about it. So they just kept telling all the people that they really loved, like, I just have to work harder, and that's how I'm going to win.
Yeah. It's always that disaster of holding on to things too tightly, right? It's like, you have to be willing to let things go, whether it be relationships or jobs or whatever. And so you have to be able to assert yourself and assert your boundaries and just say, if consequences come, consequences come. But you're going to have more opportunity, and people will respect you more. And ironically, you'll get more opportunities. You'll have more relationships. You'll be more attractive. You'll get more job offers. You'll get promoted more when you're a person who asserts themselves and asserts your own boundaries, even though it may seem like being the kiss ass or the brown nose or just doing whatever or not walking on eggshells is the thing to do. It's not the thing to do.
It's not. Remember, okay, in high school, the guy who got the most gals was the guy who was probably not the nicest guy. He was not the weakest guy. He was the one who acted like he didn't care what you thought, right? And he was always surrounded by a cadre of beautiful high school women, you know, and they were, you know, but the whole point was, I was shocked in high school that being a nice guy did not get me really any attention from the opposite sex.
Right.
Shockingly, I did very poorly in this area. And it was all because I was like, oh, look at me. Oh, I'll be your friend. Oh, and you know, when you chase it too hard, it stinks. And everybody knows it stinks. And you're no different than today. So
exactly. Yeah.
It's pretty sad. Okay, but let me just hit this last point here, because a lot of times I talk to really good team leads who are getting a lot of pressure from their boss. Yes. They don't want to push the team harder, but they feel like they're compressed between a team that says we have to have space, we need a boundary, and a boss that's saying more, more, more. You guys are not delivering enough. So what should people do when their boss is the one and the outside pressure is coming in? I think it's our job as leaders to protect our team. So we've got to grow a backbone, or whatever part needs to be grown. And we need to start having some honest conversation. We need to start measuring from numbers and pushing back. We need to start padding our estimates way out that give us the space. And we need to think about, what does it take, not just to do a project, but to do a project the right way and in a sustainable way that the team feels good about. Starting to look at those internal metrics rather than just saying, well, I think we only need 100 hours to get it out the door. After 100 hours, it's out the door and there's a mountain of bugs and your team's pissed off because they didn't get a chance to refactor or do code coverage or test coverage or anything else. So start budgeting for the holistic process, and then just don't let yourself be bullied. Have honest conversations with those people that are pressuring you.
Exactly. Yeah. I think also you can get into this whole like personal conflict type of thing where it's like boss says, you know, and you're fighting, pushing back. Whereas one technique I've always used is, you know, I can't promise you, like I think we can do this. Estimates are always estimates in software development, but I'm keeping you updated. So I'm always like, okay, here's where we're at right now.
Right.
It's this way. I don't have to say we can't make it in 3 months. You can look at where we're at and you can know, right? Because if I tell you, oh, we can't make it, no, pushing too hard, we can't do it. Then you say, yeah, you could do it. What do you got? You know,
you're not even trying, John. Come on.
But if I keep you updated and show you numbers, and also I think on the other side of it too is like, where do people get in trouble when schedules slip? It's when 2 days before it's supposed to release, you have the meeting and you say, hey, we're not going to be able to make it.
Right. We're going to be another 6 weeks. What?
Right.
how come I'm only hearing about this now? And then you have a
Exactly.
problem. I think Steve McConnell did a great software engineering radio podcast on estimation, where he talked about estimates are oftentimes heard as commitments or targets by the people that are listening to them. So even though you're saying this word estimate, what somebody else is hearing is promise or commitment. I'm committing to get it done in 1,000 hours. I think one of the least often tools that I see used that could be used really well is re-estimation.
Exactly.
And so if you've got a 6-month project, every sprint, maybe you're doing 2-week sprints, re-estimate what it would take from the point you're at now to get to the end. Go through that re-estimation process. I even ask in stand-up whenever I run teams, I want to know, the standard 3 things. What'd you do? What are you going to do? And are you blocked? But I always also throw in, has your estimate of the work changed?
Right.
I don't need an estimate, but if somebody says, yeah, I think it's different, I'm going to go back to them and afterwards and say, well, what have you learned? Right? Because if you've learned something that changes it, schedules slip one day at a time. And I'm going to make sure that updated estimate gets to all the stakeholders, so nobody's surprised 2 days beforehand.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I even just do it personally in my own day. Right. So like, how you have those long to-do lists, like you plan out your day, and then something goes wrong and you don't get it done, and then you're trying to, like, you start to, pretty soon you catch yourself like just on Facebook or checking your email because you're procrastinating because you can't get done everything that you're supposed to get done in the day. So what I do is, yeah.
Go ahead. So what you do?
So what I do is I say, okay, obviously my schedule is out of whack. I can't get done everything. So I'm replanning the day starting now. Like, it's noon. Okay, fine. Let's go. Let's see what can be done. There's 4 hours left. What can be done in that? And so I replan it and schedule it. So now my to-do list, I chop it down to a realistic thing that I can do. And that's that. I mean, it's the same thing on software development projects. It's like you said, the estimation is extremely important. Just, okay, where we're at now, it doesn't matter what we planned. Where we're at now, what is the current, right. And you get more accurate as you get closer to the goal. And that's Absolutely. The beauty of it. So
yeah, Steve McConnell talks about the cone of uncertainty narrows the farther into the project. Your estimates become better and better. You've learned, right? Instead of having a wide variation, you have a little narrower. The next week, you get smarter all the way along the way. Okay. All right. So breaking promises is really the next thing. I see this happen all the time, but not like I say, John, I'm going to give you Friday off. And then I come to you and I say, John, I can't. That's a pretty clear broken promise. It's right. For example, I wrote this story after a friend of mine joined a company. And when he joined in the interview, they said, we want your particular skills because we're going to do a full re-architecture and rewrite on the platform. Right. And we're really excited to do that. And so he joins the company and he's thinking, okay, I'm all in. He'd worked on this legacy code for like 10 years. So he was really excited to do something new. And a year in, no word of the rewrite and he was like, I thought we were going to do that. And the guy was like, well, the company owner decided it wasn't a priority and he actually bought a plane and now he's traveling the world. So he wanted a little time off. So we're not going to do the rewrite. And my boss, my friend was just like, what a crock of crap, right? What a lie. Like I came on to do this great thing and you didn't even tell me it was canceled. I had to ask a year later. And now you tell me, oh, by the way, we don't care about that anymore. Yeah. How can I possibly trust you when you break that promise?
Yeah, I totally agree. And that happens all the time. I get complaints on, I believe in my email from YouTube viewers that are like, I got this job and they said that we're going to work in, and I've been there before, right? I said that we're going to work in C# and rewrite this whole thing. And I'm doing VB6 maintenance code.
I'm in Excel macros, John. I'm in hell. Help me. Well, and it also happens like, have you ever heard this? Like, if you work hard, I bet in a year, you'll be ready for a promotion. Or, I mean, that's a promise, right? That's saying, if you do this, we'll do that. Or you'll get to that salary you want if you put in the extra effort. Or I bet we'll adopt Clojure if we can do X and Y. We're going to go there, I promise. And all of a sudden, it's just never spoken of again. That's a broken promise.
Yeah. It's always better to like under promise and over deliver for sure. Like, and just not to make promises very often at all. Like again,
Yeah.
like, you know, you've got to, if your word is so valuable, and once you lose it, it's no one will trust you again.
Absolutely. And, I think we need to start recognizing that everything we say is actually a promise to our team.
Yeah,
If we
exactly.
say that we're going to let them take Fridays off because they worked really hard, that, even though if you don't have to use the word promise, right? That's like a
Right.
5-year-old's view of a promise. Well, I didn't say promise, so you can't hold me to it. No, that's crap. Like if you said it, it's a promise, and they expect you to come through. And if you can't, they expect you to come around and readdress it with them, acknowledge the fact that you broke the promise, and tell them how you're going to make it right. And for you to be very aware, like you said, John, that you just need to be careful about what you're saying to people. I think a lot of times, again, that interview process feels like a sales pitch. All the great things we're going to do, lots of promises are made, very few of them are delivered.
And imagine if, as a manager, the benefit that you would have if you turned that around. Imagine if you offered someone, if you agreed on a salary of, let's say, $80,000 a year, and when they got their first, when they actually got the paperwork, it said on the paper 82,000, right? Not a huge amount, right? Like
a little bit.
But then they're like, man, like they over delivered. They gave me more than they said they were going to give me. That's like, imagine how hard that person's going to work, and how like that relationship's going to start out. And that's, I mean, in a lot of different ways. And anything that you do, you can always just, if you adjust up just a little bit, rather the opposite. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine
same amount, right? $2,000.
Right. They promised, you said $82,000, and then you actually gave them 80, right? Like you
would you even take that deal?
No, you'd be so pissed, right? You're actually, in fact, you could be getting more money. We could say that you got $84,000 was what is agreed, and they gave you 82, and if you had both those scenarios, in the one where you got 80 or let's say 86 to 84, right? And the one where you got more money, you would be more pissed because they went down from what they said. Because it doesn't actually matter what the value is, it's what the expectation is. So managing that expectation, when you set an expectation, you better deliver above the expectation, not below it.
I think it's brilliant. The idea, if you just started adding, if you always kept in your back pocket $1,000 to add on to every new person's salary unexpectedly, or kept it and even a month in, you gave them that 1K bump, totally out of the blue, something like that, where they're like, wow, John is totally looking out for me. Like I don't have to take on a tough guy exterior. He's on my side. I don't have to go to battle just for a little bit more money. I bet he's going to want to protect me. He must really value me, right?
Right. Exactly.
You may not actually care about the person at all as a leader. It's just a technique, but it's going to send all kinds of signals that, you really are a good person, and that you're really working on their behalf.
Right. Yeah. It's going to trigger the reciprocity as well.
Exactly. At the end of the day, I believe that all of us want a deep, trusted connection with our leaders, our managers. Like we have to have that. Leader-member exchange theory is my management theory of choice, and it really emphasizes that role that leaders have with their people. In fact, all the studies that have been done over the last 30 years directly correlate job performance, job satisfaction with the quality of the relationship that you have with each person. And so it's actually not about the tools and the languages and all the cool stuff. It's just about them trusting you and you trusting them. And all of these habits, and the last one here we'll talk about just briefly, all of these habits undermine trust. I think that's kind of the main theme here.
Yep.
So the last habit here is just the idea that you as the boss have some special privileges. And I see this more in corporate environments, but I think it can happen anywhere, right? Like maybe nobody can commit. Maybe you're in your team, everybody commits into feature branches, except you as the leader sometimes will just commit to the master, right? You'll just skip the PR because your stuff is good, right? Well, what signal does that send to everybody else?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. It's actually the opposite of the idea of kind of the servant leadership, which is that you should be the one, like like if you really want to lead people, it's by example, right? And
Yes.
and that means that you make a bigger burden on yourself. You do everything that you ask people to do, and you do more. You know, that's one of the things, like with this YouTube channel that I when people say, why do you do all this extreme shit, and like, why do you like these crazy diets, and like, you know, doing all this stuff, it's like, well, if I'm going to ask you to step up and change your life, I'm going to do like way more than I'm asking you to do, right? Because that's going to give people the example. Whereas if you do it the opposite way, you're going to send them that example. It's, well, I don't really need to follow the rules.
Not really. And you know what? Yeah. So whether it is that you don't have to come in on Saturdays, but everybody else does, or that you can commit code right to master, you can push and just fix things on the production server, even though your team can't do those things, or you would penalize them for doing them. Like, those are all places where you are not acting with a lot of integrity.
Right.
John, you're a parent, right? You know, how many kids do you have? One or two?
Just
I think
one. Yeah.
But it's a girl, right? Little girl. And
Yeah.
she is watching how you act all the time.
Right.
Like, the difference between what you say and what you do, she will do what you do every single day of the week, right?
Exactly. Yep. Exactly.
Yep. And I hate to say it, but I do think, especially, well, I won't say this, but I think your team's always looking to see how you act, and they're just going to mimic your behavior. You're modeling what good behavior is. So you do have to be above reproach, right?
Yep.
You know, there's a lot of talk. I think I was listening to somebody right now. We've got a lot of politics in this country, and a lot of people are doing things that, and then they're claiming they didn't do those things. But if we've got a lot of leaders that haven't really acted above reproach, and that makes people distrust them, even though they don't even know them. There's the smell of impropriety and the smell of taking special privileges. So right. It's a huge trust killer on your team.
Yeah. I mean, it also brings up that point, just like appearances is what people look at.
That's what matters.
Appears, right? So if it appears that something is you may not even be doing wrong, but the appearance of wrong is more important than the action of wrong. And so
I know a few times, like, I'd work all night at my job because I was a team lead and there was a problem, and I wouldn't come in till noon the next day. And people, the first time I did it, they'd always be like, oh, somebody's getting in late. And I would actually go to the team and huddle up and say, well, I just need to let you know, I want to be accountable because I tell you guys to be here by 9. Right. I wasn't here until noon. I didn't leave until 5:30 a.m. because I was up all night. This isn't bragging, but I need you to know that I really do want to be here by 9, and I expect you to. And so, like, this was not just me slacking off. And, you know, either that or I'd wake up at 8:45 and I'd send that email, right? That would say, guys, I was here till 5 a.m. and I'm going to be in at noon, that sort of thing. Because otherwise it looks like a special privilege, like I'm playing by a different set of rules.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Well, you know, I think so, John, I really appreciate you having me on. I want to, for folks who buy the book, I want to challenge you. If you're interested, you can email me at marcus@marcusblankenship.com, and I'll send you a light version of the book that can be used in a really special way. This is if you've purchased the full book. What I've had people giving sort of this light 7-page version out to their team, and then asking their team, do I do any of these things? Because sometimes it's a little hard to tell if you're doing them, right? And in this way, it actually becomes like a mirror. You can start to open up really good feedback discussions with your team. You might not think you're taking special privileges. Your team might perceive, yeah, it's kind of a problem, right? And you'd want to know that. And so if, you know, it's just I call it the team edition of the book. You can email me and I'll send it to you for free after you've purchased the book. And you can start to use this to get really interesting feedback from your own team.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Yeah, and let's put a link for the book. Where can people go to get the book? Should they look on Amazon? Is that
it is on Amazon. It's on LeanPub is the place where they'll get updates. I'm adding 3 more chapters about not shaming programmers, about holding the team's toes to unrealistic estimates, and believing in unicorns. So those are coming in the next couple months. And I think LeanPub's a better place because then you'll get those updates for free.
Yeah. Okay, good. Awesome. That's awesome. Looking forward to the not shaming chapter. I think that's a big problem.
It is. It is. Absolutely. Well, John, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate all your insights from running your company and your experience.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Like doing these chats with you. So till next time, Marcus.
Take care.
Yep.
Bye.